The snickers and barely hidden laughter followed Captain James Miller through the space station's crowded marketplace. He kept his face neutral, pretending not to notice the pointing fingers and whispered comments from the various alien species around him. His ship, the Barnacle, hung visible through the station's massive viewing windows, looking exactly like what its name suggested: a giant, rough-surfaced rock covered in crusty protrusions. "Look at that primitive thing," a tall, blue-skinned merchant said loudly to his companion. "Can you believe the humans actually travel between stars in that?" Miller smiled to himself. Let them laugh. Let them point. The more they underestimated the Barnacle, the better. He made his way to a supply shop, where the owner, a squat creature with multiple arms, barely contained his amusement while processing Miller's order for basic supplies. "Your ship, it still uses chemical fuel tanks?" the owner asked, mandibles twitching with poorly disguised mirth. "Among other things," Miller replied calmly. "We humans have to make do with what we have." The owner's assistant, restocking shelves nearby, didn't even try to hide his laughter. "Did you hear? They still use rotating sections for artificial gravity, like children playing with toys." Miller collected his supplies and headed back to his ship. As he approached the docking bay, he caught sight of his reflection in a polished wall panel. His worn captain's uniform, deliberately chosen to look slightly outdated, completed the image of a human trying, and failing, to keep up with galactic standards. The Barnacle's airlock cycled open with a hiss that seemed unnecessarily loud compared to the nearly silent doors of other ships. Inside, his crew worked with practiced efficiency that would have surprised their alien critics. Lieutenant Tom Baker looked up from his console, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Another successful supply run, Captain." "How many laughed this time?" "Lost count at 12, Miller replied, setting down his supplies. "The good news is no one's looking too closely at what we're actually doing out here." The bridge of the Barnacle looked exactly like what everyone expected of humanity's first interstellar vessel. Slightly cramped, with exposed pipes and conduits, screens that seemed a generation behind galactic standards, and seats that actually needed safety restraints. The perfect image of a species struggling to keep up with their galactic neighbors. "Status report," Miller asked, settling into his captain's chair with an intentionally loud creak. "All systems nominal," Baker replied, tapping at his screen. "The outer shell is collecting data exactly as planned. We've mapped another 30 ships that passed within range today." "Good. And our special projects?" "Engineering reports the new improvements are integrating perfectly. Nobody who scans us will see anything but exactly what they expect. An outdated human vessel barely worth their attention." The Barnacle's true nature remained hidden beneath its rough exterior. Each barnacle-like growth housed sophisticated sensors, weapon systems, or defensive measures that no other species had yet developed. The rotating sections for gravity. They contained emergency backup systems that could keep the ship running even if main power failed. Those primitive chemical fuel tanks. Storage for experimental technologies that humanity wasn't ready to reveal to the galaxy at large. Miller pulled up the day's intelligence reports on his deliberately flickering screen. The tensions in this sector were growing. 3 major powers were building up their forces, and humanity's colonies sat right in the middle of their competing interests. But no one bothered to hide their movements from the Barnacle. After all, who would suspect the laughingstock of the galaxy of gathering critical military intelligence? "Captain," called out Communications Officer Lisa Reed, her voice carrying a note of concern. "We're picking up some interesting chatter from a passing merchant fleet. They're discussing a large military exercise planned for next month, significantly larger than anything previously announced." "Location?" Miller asked, straightening in his chair. "Just 2 systems away from New Eden Colony." Miller nodded thoughtfully. New Eden was humanity's largest off-world settlement, home to over 2 million people. Its location made it valuable to several alien powers, but its human defenders were considered too primitive to pose any real threat. "Record everything," he ordered, "and make sure our reaction seems appropriately nervous when the news officially breaks. We don't want anyone getting suspicious about how we got the information." The bridge crew worked in comfortable silence, each member playing their part in humanity's greatest deception. To the galaxy, they were the bumbling newcomers, barely able to keep their ship running. In reality, they were gathering intelligence that could mean the difference between peace and war. A warning light flashed on Baker's console. "Captain, we've got company. 3 ships approaching. Looks like that new alliance that's been flexing its military might." "Perfect," Miller said. "Time to play our part. Everyone remember, we're the primitive humans who barely understand their own technology. Reed, make sure our communications have that slight delay they've come to expect from us." The alien vessels drew alongside the Barnacle, their sleek designs contrasting sharply with the human ship's rough appearance. Their hail came through with crystal clarity, while Reed carefully degraded the Barnacle's response to seem less sophisticated. "Human vessel." The alien commander's voice carried the usual note of condescension. "You are in potential military exercise space. We suggest you alter course to avoid accidents." Miller activated his command chair's microphone, making sure it produced the expected static. "Understood, sir. We'll just need a few minutes to calculate a new course with our navigation computer. You know how these old systems are." He could practically hear the alien commander's eye rolls in the pause that followed. "Very well. Try not to take too long. We wouldn't want your primitive vessel to get caught in something beyond its capabilities." As the alien ships moved away, Miller's crew maintained their act until they were well out of range. Then Reed spoke up again, this time with no artificially induced static in the ship's internal communications. They never scanned below the surface layer. As usual, they saw exactly what they expected to see. Miller allowed himself a small smile. The Barnacle's deception grew more valuable with each passing day. While other species raced to build bigger ships with more powerful weapons, humanity had taken a different approach. They had built a vessel that no one would take seriously, and in doing so, created the perfect spy ship. "Send today's data back to Earth Command," he ordered, "encrypted in the usual way, buried in what looks like routine maintenance logs. No one ever reads those." As his crew carried out their orders, Miller watched the alien ships disappear into the distance. They had no idea that their every move, every communication, and every weapon signature had been carefully recorded and analyzed by the very vessel they dismissed as primitive. The Barnacle might look like an interstellar joke, but its mission was deadly serious. And someday, when the timing was right, those who had laughed would learn just how dangerous it was to underestimate humanity's first starship. For now, though, they would continue their act. The bumbling humans in their crude ship, barely managing to stay in space, gathering intelligence that no one thought they were capable of collecting. It wasn't a glamorous role, but it was exactly what Earth needed. Miller checked the time on his intentionally inaccurate-looking chronometer. "All right, let's move to our next observation point. And Baker, make sure our course corrections look appropriately clumsy. We wouldn't want anyone thinking we actually know what we're doing." The Barnacle's engines fired up with a deliberately uneven sound, and the ship moved away from the station, like a swimmer still learning to paddle. But beneath its rough exterior, countless sensors and systems worked with precision that would have shocked the galaxy if anyone had bothered to look closer at the ship they never took seriously. Captain Miller studied the data scrolling across his screen with growing concern. Over the past 3 weeks, the Barnacle had tracked an alarming buildup of warships in the sector. The alien alliance wasn't even trying to hide their movements anymore. Why bother concealing anything from a primitive human vessel? Another battle group just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Lieutenant Baker reported, his voice tight with tension. "That makes 37 capital ships in this sector alone." Miller nodded, maintaining his calm exterior even as his mind raced through the implications. The Barnacle had positioned itself near a popular refueling station, looking every bit like a human ship having engine troubles. Again, Their apparent mechanical difficulties had given them the perfect excuse to observe the steady stream of warships passing through the area. "Sir," Lisa Reed called from her communication station, "I'm picking up some interesting conversations. They're not even bothering to encrypt them properly." She paused, adjusting her headset. "They're talking about something called Operation Cleanup. Sounds like they're planning to clean up the neighborhood." Miller's jaw tightened. The alien alliance had been referring to human colonies as local pollution in their diplomatic messages for months now. The meaning wasn't hard to decode. "Record everything," he ordered, "and make sure our transponder is still broadcasting that fake engine malfunction. The longer they think we're stuck here making repairs, the more we can learn." Through the bridge viewport, another massive warship sailed past the Barnacle. Its crew probably saw nothing but an amusingly primitive human vessel, its hull covered in what they assumed were crude patches and repairs. None of them realized that each of those supposed repair patches was actually a sophisticated sensor array recording their every move. "Captain," Baker said suddenly, "one of their ships is approaching. They're hailing us." Miller straightened in his chair, quickly adjusting his uniform to look slightly disheveled. "Remember, everyone, we're just simple humans struggling with our outdated technology. Reed, add that interference pattern we used last time." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of an alien commander. His expression carried the usual mix of amusement and condescension. "Human vessel," he said, "you appear to be having difficulties. Again." "Yes, sir," Miller replied, making sure his voice carried just a hint of embarrassment. "We're having some trouble with our drive systems. Just can't seem to figure out what's wrong." He gestured vaguely at the exposed pipes running along the bridge ceiling, pipes that actually housed some of Earth's most advanced computing systems. The alien commander's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "Perhaps it's time your species admitted you're not ready for deep space travel. This sector is becoming quite busy. It would be unfortunate if your primitive vessel got caught in the middle of something beyond your understanding." "Thank you for your concern, sir," Miller replied, adding just the right touch of wounded pride to his voice. "We'll try to be out of your way as soon as possible." After the transmission ended, the bridge crew maintained their act for several more minutes, just in case they were still being watched. Finally, Reed spoke up. "They're out of scanning range, Captain." But that sounded an awful lot like a warning. "More like a threat," Baker added. "They're not even trying to be subtle anymore." Miller pulled up the intelligence they'd gathered over the past month on his screen. The pattern was clear now. The alien alliance was positioning their forces around key human colonies, preparing for what they probably thought would be an easy conquest. "Send everything we have to Earth Command," he ordered. "Use the new compression algorithm. Make it look like we're transmitting maintenance logs. Add plenty of errors to make it seem authentic." The Barnacle's sophisticated communications array, hidden beneath layers of apparent rust and decay, began transmitting data that would have shocked their arrogant neighbors. Every ship movement, every weapon's signature, every scrap of tactical information they'd gathered, all disguised as the mundane technical problems of a struggling human vessel. Hours passed as they continued their surveillance. The steady stream of warships showed no signs of slowing. Some of the alien vessels were so massive they made the Barnacle look like a space taxi in comparison. But size wasn't everything, as humanity had learned long ago. "New contact," Baker announced. "This one's different, reading energy signatures I've never seen before." Through the viewport, they watched as a strange ship emerged from faster-than-light travel. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and its design was unlike anything in their database. "Are they scanning us?" Miller asked. "Hard to tell, sir," Baker replied. "Their technology is strange, but they're definitely interested in something." For several tense minutes, the mysterious vessel hung in space, neither moving nor communicating. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished back into faster-than-light travel. "Well, that was different," Reed said, breaking the silence. "Should we be worried?" Miller tapped his fingers on his armrest, thinking. Add it to the report for Earth Command. But keep our focus on the Alliance fleet. They're the immediate threat. As if to emphasize his point, another group of warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their massive forms blocking out the stars. The Barnacle's sensors recorded everything while maintaining their facade of a ship barely able to keep its lights on. "Sir," Reed said suddenly, "I'm picking up some encoded transmissions. They're using a new encryption, but," she smiled, "they still don't think we're smart enough to crack it." Message mentioned something about final preparations and cleansing protocols. Miller's expression hardened. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was grim. The Alien Alliance wasn't just planning an attack. They were preparing for a full-scale invasion of human space. "How many ships have we tracked so far?" he asked. Baker consulted his readings. Over 200 capital ships, plus support vessels. Enough firepower to flatten every human colony in the sector. He paused. "Sir, shouldn't we be warning the colonies?" "Earth Command will handle that," Miller replied. "Our job is to keep playing the fool. The more they underestimate us, the better chance we have of surviving what's coming." Through the viewport, they watched as yet another battle group moved into position. The alien ships were impressive, their hulls gleaming with advanced technology that they proudly displayed to the galaxy. In contrast, the Barnacle looked like it belonged in a scrapyard, its surface covered in what appeared to be random growths and patches. But appearances could be deceiving. Under that rough exterior, the Barnacle was recording, analyzing, and transmitting data that would prove crucial in the coming conflict. The Alien Alliance thought they were being clever, positioning their forces while the primitive humans remained oblivious. They had no idea that their every move was being watched by the very ship they dismissed as space junk. "Keep monitoring everything," Miller ordered. "Every ship, every transmission, every energy signature. The time for playing dumb won't last much longer, but while it does." He allowed himself a small smile. "Let's make sure we know exactly what we're up against." The Barnacle continued its vigil, looking to all the world like a helpless human vessel stranded among giants. But inside, its crew worked tirelessly, gathering the intelligence that might soon mean the difference between survival and extinction for their species. The storm was coming, and when it broke, the galaxy would learn that appearances could be very deceiving indeed. The attack began at dawn, Earth Standard Time. The Alien Alliance didn't bother with a formal declaration of war. They simply opened fire on the outer colonies. The Barnacle watched from its hiding spot behind a small moon as massive warships moved into position around New Eden Colony. Miller gathered his crew on the bridge. The time for pretending had ended. "They think this will be easy," he said, looking at each crew member in turn. "They expect us to run, to beg for mercy, or to fight with outdated weapons, and die quickly." He smiled grimly. "Let's show them how wrong they are." Through the viewport, they could see civilian ships fleeing the colony. The alien fleet paid little attention to them. After all, what harm could primitive human vessels do? The Barnacle remained motionless, its rough exterior blending with the moon's rocky surface. "All those months of playing dumb," Baker said, his fingers dancing across his control panel. "All those times we let them laugh at us. It ends today." The supposedly crude patches and barnacles covering the ship's hull began to shift slightly, preparing for their true purpose. "Sir," Reed called out, "message from Earth Command. All other human ships have evacuated the sector. We're authorized to proceed with Operation Trojan." Miller nodded. The name was fitting. Like the ancient horse, the Barnacle had been welcomed into enemy territory because no one suspected its true nature. Status of the enemy fleet: 342 capital ships in range, Baker reported, plus support vessels. They're moving into bombardment positions around New Eden. He paused. "They're powering up their weapons." "Not this time," Miller said quietly. "Reed, send the activation signal." Reed's fingers flew across her console, sending out a complex series of commands that looked like random static to anyone intercepting them. Across the barnacle's hull, thousands of tiny changes began to occur. The alien fleet's first volley of weapons fire lit up space around New Eden. Their massive guns targeted what they thought were the colony's primitive defenses, but their shots passed through empty air. The defensive platforms they saw were just holograms, part of an elaborate deception months in the making. They took the bait, Baker announced. Their fleet is condensing, moving closer to maximize their firepower against the fake defenses. Miller watched as the enemy ships clustered together, their formation perfect for what was about to happen. Initialize the swarm. The barnacle's transformation began. What the aliens had mocked as crude barnacles and patches suddenly came alive. Each protrusion split open, revealing its true nature. Thousands of tiny drones, each no bigger than a human hand, poured out of the ship's hull. Swarm deployment at 30%, Baker reported, his voice tense with excitement. No sign they've detected us yet. On the main screen, they watched as their ship's true weapons emerge. Each drone carried a fraction of the firepower of a capital ship's guns, but there were thousands of them, and they had surprise on their side. Swarm deployment at 60%, Baker continued. The enemy fleet is still focused on the colony. Miller watched as the alien ships continued their useless bombardment of holographic targets. Their arrogance, their certainty of victory over the primitive humans, had blinded them to the truth. They never bothered to look closely at the laughingstock of the galaxy. Swarm deployment complete, Baker announced. 100,000 drones ready for action. Miller took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. Execute attack pattern Alpha. Show them what humanity can really do. The swarm moved like a living thing, spreading out in three-dimensional patterns that no conventional fleet could match. By the time the alien ships detected the approaching drones, it was too late. The first wave struck the outer edges of the enemy fleet. Each tiny drone carried a payload that could bypass standard shields. Technology the aliens had never seen because humanity had kept it hidden, wrapped in a cloak of apparent incompetence. Multiple direct hits, Baker reported, his voice rising with excitement. Their shields aren't stopping our drones. 20 enemy ships disabled in the first wave. The alien fleet scrambled to respond, but their tactics were all wrong. They were used to fighting big ships, capital ships, not thousands of tiny targets that could slip through their defensive screens. Their massive weapons were useless against targets too small and too numerous to track. Enemy fleet is trying to regroup, Reed reported. They're sending out general distress calls. Listen to this. They're saying they're under attack by some kind of space insects. Miller allowed himself a grim smile. Send in the second wave. Target their command and control systems. The swarm shifted, forming new patterns. Drones that had expended their weapons returned to the barnacle, disappearing into its hull to rearm. Fresh waves emerged, diving into the chaos of battle. Sir, Reed called out. They're finally scanning us properly. They've realized what we are. On the main screen, they could see the alien fleet turning their guns toward the barnacle's position. But they were too late. The swarm was inside their formation now, thousands of drones striking at vital systems with surgical precision. Enemy ships are starting to retreat, Baker reported. Their formation is breaking up. Miller watched as the mighty alien fleet began to crumble. Ships that could have destroyed a small moon were being taken apart piece by weapons they had never thought to defend against. The swarm moved through their ranks like a tide, unstoppable and relentless. Message from the enemy flagship, Reed announced. They're asking for terms of surrender. The bridge crew fell silent. After months of being laughed at, months of pretending to be primitive and harmless, they had just defeated the largest alien fleet ever assembled in the sector. Tell them, Miller said, that the primitive humans accept their surrender, and suggest they spread the word. Sometimes the ones you laugh at the most are the ones you should fear the most. The swarm began to return to the barnacle, thousands of tiny drones disappearing back into what the aliens had thought were just ugly protrusions on the hull. As the enemy fleet limped away, Miller looked at his crew with pride. "Well done, everyone. Earth Command will be pleased. We just field-tested our new defense system and saved a colony at the same time." Baker laughed. "And all it took was letting everyone think we were a joke for months. Think they'll stop laughing at us now?" "Oh, I hope not," Miller replied with a smile. "Being underestimated is one of humanity's greatest advantages. Besides," he gestured at the barnacle's still rough-looking exterior, "we have more surprises hidden under our ugly shell." As the last of the swarm returned home, the barnacle resumed its appearance as the most primitive-looking ship in the galaxy. But now, as news of the battle spread, that appearance would carry a different meaning. The ship they had laughed at had just destroyed their best fleet, and no one would look at the barnacle-covered vessel quite the same way again. News of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The barnacle's victory had shattered more than just the alien fleet. It had destroyed centuries of assumptions about human technology. But Captain Miller knew the war wasn't over. The enemy would be back, and this time they wouldn't underestimate the ugly little ship that had humiliated them. 3 days after the battle, the barnacle patrolled the edges of human space, its swarm replenished and ready. The ship still looked as primitive as ever. Miller had insisted they maintain the deception. After all, there might be other secrets worth keeping. "Incoming transmission from Earth Command," Reed announced from her station. "They're picking up massive fleet movements in 3 sectors. The aliens are gathering for another attack." Miller studied the tactical display. The enemy was being more careful this time, spreading their forces out to avoid presenting an easy target for the swarm. They were learning, adapting. But so were the humans. "They're not just coming back for revenge," Baker said, analyzing the data. "Look at these energy readings. They've modified their shields. They're trying to counter our drones." Miller nodded. He'd expected this. "Show me the drone status." Baker brought up a new display. The barnacle's hull was alive with activity beneath its rough exterior. The swarm was evolving too, incorporating new features based on data from the first battle. Each drone was being upgraded, becoming deadlier, more efficient. "Sir," Reed called out, "we're getting signals from everyone. Every species in the sector wants to talk to us now. Funny how that works." "I bet they do," Miller replied. "After years of mockery, suddenly the primitive humans are worth talking to." He straightened in his chair. "But conversations can wait. We have incoming." Through the viewport, they could see the first wave of enemy ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. These vessels were different. Their hulls bristled with new weapons, and their formation was loose and scattered. They had learned from their mistakes. Detecting new shield configurations, Baker reported. "They've developed some kind of energy web between their ships. They're trying to catch our drones." Miller smiled. "Good thing we didn't show them everything in the first battle." "Reed, signal Earth Command. Tell them we're engaging the enemy. Then activate Protocol Omega." The bridge crew exchanged excited looks. They had trained for this, but none of them had seen it in action before. The barnacle's rough exterior began to shift in new ways, panels moving that had never moved before. "Enemy fleet is launching fighters," Baker announced. "Thousands of them. They're creating a screen around their capital ships." "Let them think that will help," Miller said. "Deploy the swarm, but only the older models. Let's see how their new defenses hold up." The first wave of drones poured from the barnacle's hull, streaming toward the enemy fleet. The alien fighters moved to intercept them, their new weapons filling space with energy pulses designed to disable the tiny attackers. Some of the drones fell, but others got through, striking at the capital ships. This time, though, the enemy was ready. Their new shields flickered but held. "Their defenses are working," Baker reported. "The standard drones aren't getting through." "Of course not," Miller replied calmly. "That's exactly what we wanted them to think. Reed, Signal all ships in the sector. Warn them to shut down their sensors for the next 30 seconds. Then activate the Medusa protocol. The barnacle's transformation began in earnest. The rough hull that had been the source of so much mockery suddenly became fluid, the barnacle-like growths elongating and splitting. What had looked like random patches of rust and decay revealed themselves as launch ports for something entirely new. Medusa swarm deploying, Baker announced, his voice filled with awe. The new drones were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They moved like liquid metal, changing shape as they flew. The enemy fighters tried to engage them, but their targeting systems couldn't lock onto something that constantly shifted its form. Enemy shields are failing, Baker reported. The Medusa drones are. They're passing right through their energy webs. Miller watched as his ship's latest weapons went to work. The new drones didn't just attack, they infected. Each one that made it through the enemy's defenses attached itself to their hull, using their own power systems against them. 50 enemy ships disabled, Baker called out. 100, 200, they're dropping like flies. The alien fleet's formation dissolved into chaos. Ships tried to flee, but the Medusa swarm was relentless. What had started as a massive attack force was rapidly becoming a collection of drifting hulks. "Sir," Reed said suddenly, "the enemy commander is requesting to speak with us." Miller nodded. "Put him through." The main screen lit up, showing the alien commander's face. Gone was the arrogance, the condescension. Now there was only shock, and perhaps a hint of fear. What are you?" the commander asked. "We're the primitive humans," Miller replied calmly. "The ones you thought weren't ready for deep space. The ones you laughed at. The ones you never took seriously." He paused. "Would you like to surrender again?" The commander's multiple eyes blinked rapidly. "Those ships you disabled, my people, are perfectly safe," Miller finished for him. "Unlike you, we don't believe in unnecessary killing. Your crews are unharmed. Your ships can be reactivated once we're certain you're heading home. Consider it a lesson in humility." The Medusa swarm was returning to the barnacle now, the liquid metal drones flowing back into their hidden ports. The ship's hull resumed its deliberately ugly appearance, once again looking like something that belonged in a scrapyard. "Spread the word," Miller told the enemy commander. "Humanity may look primitive to you, but appearances can be deceiving. We've been in space longer than you think, learning, watching, preparing. You saw our first line of defense today. Pray you never have to see our second." After the enemy fleet had been allowed to limp away, Baker turned to his captain. "Sir, do we actually have a second line of defense?" Miller smiled mysteriously. "Maybe. Maybe not. But they'll drive themselves crazy trying to figure it out." He looked at his crew. "That's humanity's greatest weapon. Not our technology, but our ability to keep them guessing. They thought they knew everything about us, and that certainty was their weakness." The barnacle resumed its patrol, looking as harmless as ever, but word was spreading across the galaxy. The ship that had been a joke, the crew everyone had mocked, the humans who seemed so primitive, they had defeated two of the largest fleets ever assembled, using weapons no one had imagined possible. "Sir," Reed said, checking her communications panel, "we're getting messages from 15 different species. They all want to establish diplomatic relations with Earth. 5 of them are offering technology exchanges." "Tell them we'll consider their offers," Miller replied. "But first, let's make sure our friends got the message about leaving human space alone." The barnacle moved through space, its rough hull catching the light of distant stars. To most observers, it still looked like the same old primitive vessel, barely worth a second glance. But now that appearance carried a warning. Underestimate humanity at your own risk. 1 month after the second battle, the barnacle docked at Earth's primary space station. The same dock workers who had once snickered at the ship's ugly appearance now treated it with careful respect. News reporters crowded behind safety barriers, trying to get pictures of the vessel that had changed humanity's place in the galaxy. Captain Miller stood at attention in Earth Command's main conference room, facing the assembled leaders of humanity's space forces. The wall screen showed representatives from colonies across human space, all eager to hear his report. The Alien Alliance has withdrawn all forces from human-controlled sectors, Miller reported. Their leadership has formally requested peace talks. More importantly, 7 other species have approached us about forming defensive pacts. Admiral Wilson, a stern-faced woman with gray hair, nodded approvingly. And the technology demonstration requests. 23 so far, Miller replied. Everyone wants to know how we built the swarm. The Medusa units in particular have caught their attention. He paused. Of course, we haven't shown them everything yet. The Admiral smiled. No, we haven't. Speaking of which, your ship's refit is scheduled to begin tomorrow. The Barnacle will be the first to receive the new systems. Miller raised an eyebrow. Even he hadn't known about this. New systems. Did you think the swarm was our only secret? The Admiral's smile widened. Those barnacles on your hull weren't just for show or for launching drones. They're connection points for the next phase of human technological advancement. After the briefing, Miller walked through the station's corridors with his crew. They passed aliens who now moved aside respectfully, some even bowing slightly. The same beings who had laughed at them months ago now treated them like heroes. Hard to believe it's only been a month, Baker said, watching an alien diplomatic party hurry past. Remember when they used to point and laugh at us? I almost miss it, Reed replied. Life was simpler when everyone thought we were idiots. They reached the observation deck and looked out at the Barnacle. Work crews were already swarming around it, preparing for the refit. The ship still looked as crude as ever, its hull still covered in barnacle-like growths. Captain, a voice called from behind them. They turned to see Dr. Helen Ray, Earth's Chief of Research and Development, approaching with a data tablet. I thought you'd like to see the specs for your ship's upgrade. Miller accepted the tablet and began reading. His eyes widened. This is incredible. The swarm was just the beginning. Just the first layer, Dr. Ray confirmed. Those barnacles on your hull, they're quantum-locked attachment points. Once we install the new systems, your ship will be able to generate its own microfleet. Not just drones, but fully functional combat vessels that can fold out of what looks like simple hull plating. Baker whistled softly. No wonder we kept the ugly design. The whole ship is one big deception. More than that, Dr. Ray said. It's a template. We're refitting the entire fleet to match the Barnacle's capabilities. Soon, every human ship will look like a primitive rust bucket, and every one of them will be able to spawn an entire battle fleet from its hull. Through the viewport, they watched as engineers began the delicate work of upgrading the Barnacle. The ship that had started as a joke, that had been laughed at across the galaxy, was about to become even more dangerous. There's something else, Dr. Ray added, her voice dropping to a near whisper. We've detected unusual energy signatures from that mysterious ship you encountered before the first battle. The one that seemed to absorb light. It's been watching us, studying us. And it's not alone. Miller felt a chill run down his spine. Another potential enemy. Or maybe something else. The point is, humanity needs to be ready. The Barnacle proved our strategy works. Looking primitive, harmless, letting others underestimate us while we prepare our defenses. Now we're taking it to the next level. Later that evening, Miller stood alone on the observation deck, watching his ship. Engineers had removed some of the hull plating, revealing the incredibly advanced technology hidden beneath the crude exterior. Soon, those systems would be even more powerful. Quite a view, isn't it? A voice said beside him. Miller turned to see Admiral Wilson had joined him. Hard to believe that just a few months ago, that ship was the laughingstock of the galaxy. Now they're all trying to figure out what other secrets we're hiding, Miller replied. The funny thing is, they're still underestimating us. They think the swarm and the Medusa units are our biggest surprises. The Admiral nodded. Let them think that. Meanwhile, we'll keep developing, keep innovating. The basic design principle of the barnacle is being applied to everything we build now, looking primitive on the outside while housing incredible technology within. And the mysterious ships, the ones watching us, all part of a bigger game, the Admiral said. One we've been preparing for longer than most people know. The Alien Alliance's attack was just a test, a chance to field test our new technologies without revealing everything we can do. Miller looked back at his ship. The barnacle was never really about fighting, was it? It was about showing just enough of our capabilities to make potential enemies think twice, while keeping our real strength hidden. Exactly. And it worked perfectly. Now everyone in the galaxy is wondering what else these primitive humans might be hiding. The Admiral smiled. Keep them guessing, Captain. That's your new mission. The barnacle isn't just a ship anymore. It's a symbol, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the ones you laugh at the most are the ones you should fear the most. As night fell over the space station, the barnacle's hull gleamed dully in the starlight. Work crews continued their mysterious upgrades, adding new layers of deception to the already enigmatic vessel. The ship that had changed the galaxy's view of humanity was about to evolve again, becoming something even more remarkable. And somewhere out in the darkness between the stars, unknown ships watched and waited, studying the primitive-looking vessel that had destroyed an armada. They too were learning an important lesson. In space, nothing was quite what it seemed, and underestimating humanity was a mistake no one would make again.